Could the demise of the Michigan offense be greatly exaggerated? Because all of the things we're hearing out of fall camp is that this offense is actually rolling. The quarterback battle, while no one has necessarily distanced themselves, has been playing absolutely amazing thus far. Could it be fall camp hype? It absolutely could be. But what if it's not? Let's hear some of what the players have to say, and we'll also share our opinions on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday. We're back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I am your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group, and I was on the ground bright and early this morning, desperate need for a nap at this point because I am not like most of you who wake up at a normal hour, and I was forced to do so and be up at 7 a.m. and down in Ann Arbor by 8:15 for an 8:30 press conference where we got to hear from 4 different players. And I want to hone in on what was being said about the offense on today's show because I felt like there was even more than what we had in the last week of these positive patterns of what is being said of the offense. Now, again, the caveat, this absolutely could be fall camp hype. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about that because it's not very often that you necessarily hear players or coaches come out and say, well, this position group could be a lot better. They need a lot of work or anything like that. But at the same time, a lot of times you can glean the things that are going on by what they kind of omit. And they're not really omitting anything. It's like, guys, this is good, right? Like we're hearing like things like JJ McCarthy-esque kind of caliber type of play from the quarterbacks. And I mean, the offense beat the defense. We know last week, Kenneth Grant spoke about that. He was asked, is this like the defense is winning like 60% of the battles and the offense is winning like 40%? What's the kind of deal here? But he said, no, it's like a 50-50. And as a result, Wink got on our behinds about it. So let's hear what Kenneth Grant had to say about it.
Nah, I wouldn't. I say 50-50 still. I mean, like the other days, the offense gave us a run for our money. Coach Wink kind of got on our ass about that. So, yeah, he got on our ass about that. So, I mean, offense is still giving us a run for our money. So, yeah, definitely.
All right, still on the right, Angelique.
I have another question, but what does it mean when Wink gets on your ass? Like, does he yell? I mean, what's he?
Nah, he's not much of a big yeller, but like when he's mad, you can tell he's mad. He turns into more of a stern voice, a stern voice. So I mean, it's just he brings it up. We have keep it real meetings, just to see what he sees and what we see out there. So I mean, just being able to have those keep it real meetings and to understand what he wants and to understand what we have to do, it plays a big role.
Okay, so this brings in a couple things here. Obviously, no quarterback is giving us trouble. That's a little bit of the truth mixed in, right? Like, there's not one guy. It's like, man, Alex Orji's just running all over us, or we can't stop the deep ball against not Jaden Davis, but Davis Warren, right? We're not hearing that from Kenneth Grant, but it's enough to where they're getting not necessarily chewed out by their defensive coordinator, but they are getting chastised for it in what is being affectionately known as the Keep It Real meetings, which I like because I love the Dave Chappelle when keeping it real goes wrong, although you hope in this case keeping it real does not go wrong. So some people I've seen comments, I tweeted out that quote on social media. Some people are like, oh no, what if it's Don Brown again? Listen, it's not Don Brown again, okay? Number one, the tail end of Don Brown, it had just as much, if not more, to do with the signals and the simplicity of his defense. This is going to be a complex situation, both from a signal as well as a schematic standpoint. So get that out of your mind right now, even if this does revert to some degree to man defense as well as to as man defense as well as a lot of blitzing. So there are other arrows in the quiver, one could say as well, when it comes to how this defense will operate. They still have zone and match concepts, right? There's a reason why this defense was installed, and it was installed 3 years ago in 2021 by Mike McDonald, right? It's just a different play caller that has different proclivities. So there is that. But this still leads me to believe, okay, if the offense is winning like 50%, because Grant could have very well said, yeah, I'd say it's probably 60-40. We're winning a fair share amount of our battles. That's not what he's saying here. He's saying, no, they're winning more than they probably should against our defense. But then talking to some other guys, to Josh Preeb and some of these other guys, they say, well, the good thing is it's making us all better going against that defense, and they're just acclimating and adapting, which is what you want. Here's the thing. What's being said of just the broad general offense versus defense, you're hearing what you want to hear from an offensive standpoint. You do not want to hear coming out of fall camp, they can't do anything. They can't move the ball. The defense is just absolutely annihilating them. And we're not hearing that. We are hearing reports from inside there. Now, this isn't my own intel. I will share that the offense did in fact win a couple days ago. And it sounds like they have continued to win since then. So I think that bodes really well for how that's going. Now, Semaj Morgan also chimed in. He had some things to say about the offense and the quarterback battle. In particular, he says like they're just so adept when it comes to throwing the football. They all throw fastballs. I know, again, you're traumatized because all Joe Milton did was throw fastballs. We'll see if that's a problem or not come the season, right? Because it could be, right? Joe Milton didn't know how to kind of layer it in there and all of that. If that becomes a problem, we'll talk about it when that happens. But the fact that they're throwing with velocity, it sounds like they're throwing with accuracy. Semaj Morgan's like, I have just as much confidence in them as I did JJ. You didn't say it in those exact words, but basically, like, it's a true battle right now. Like, no one's really pulled ahead. They're all throwing with confidence, with velocity, with accuracy, all of the things that you want. And you know what? If it does, I don't really have a favorite. I could go into the trenches essentially with any of these guys. So that's a positive, welcome thing, because you want to hear like things are on the up and up, things are moving forward, not, with when asked about like, oh, who's really standing out to you, be like, well, they're all doing good, which is what I would expect them to say, mixed with a, kind of obvious consternation from a very outspoken wide receiver. Here's the thing. Samaj Morgan's going to tell you the truth whether you want to hear it or not. It's just who he is. So I feel pretty good about where it stands at the moment. So let's talk about Samaj Morgan and how he sees the offense, and particularly his role, because he has some things that have changed. I asked him about about him becoming a more complete receiver, because that's the type of thing that we've heard coming out of fall camp was his goal all offseason. He had a response that I didn't exactly expect. So we'll hear his whole answer. It's 3 whole minutes. He talked a lot more than we're used to, even. So we'll get to him here in just a moment. But before we do, we've got a couple things that we need to get to. Primarily, eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only. Available to U.S. customers. All right. Interesting things just about the offense in general today. I came away thinking that we were going to talk a lot more defense. Just coming out of the, just looking at who we had available, Josh Preeb, Semaj Morgan. Preeb says a lot, but at the same time, it's generally consistent with what you expect from a lot of Michigan offensive linemen in that it's like, oh, okay, that's good. That's really good for you guys. Cool. That's not to disparage him or anything. And then Semaj, who is amazing, but and certainly can have a lot to say, and he had a lot to say today. But it wasn't necessarily a lot of grandiosity. There was actually a lot of introspection there, which I thought was cool. But with Jair Hill, who we had not heard from yet to this point, and Kenneth Grant, with Kenneth Grant being one of the bigger stars in all of college football, I thought, okay, we're probably going to hear a bit more from him, but didn't necessarily go that way. So Semaj, I asked him we've heard that you are working to become a more complete receiver. You're not just going to be thought of as being that slot guy, that gadget guy. What does that mean? What have you done? What's that look like? And he spent a fair share of his conversation talking about the importance of blocking. So check this out.
I ain't never started working since high school, so I always work the same. Like, shout out to Coach V. James. Like, if you interview me before, that's who I work out with, and that's who I created like a lot of my, way I move, the way I am as a receiver too. So yeah, man, I just really been attacking it the same way, because like my foot always been on the gas since I was 6 years old anyway. So I just feel like going into this season, it is a different road, but you know what I'm saying, I feel like the guy that I work out with, man, he always gonna have me in the right position to go, to be ready to go. And then also when I get to Michigan, my coaches, I feel like they're gonna put me in the best position to succeed. So as a complete receiver, I feel like I can run routes pretty well. I feel like I got pretty well hands, and I just feel like I work on everything that I feel like I'm good at too, not just what I feel like I'm not good at. Even on the blocking type, I feel like you're not a complete receiver till you can consistently be in the game and block. And receiver is not just about getting open and catching the ball. Like, that's really the main part about it. And, that's the description of the position. But a complete receiver block just like a lineman. And being at Michigan, it really just give you that will factor to really want to do something for your team. I wouldn't feel right if I got the ball and Colston was blocking for me and I scored and he got the ball like the next drive and I miss a block and he don't score. You feel me? That wouldn't be good. So you feel me? Like I feel like becoming a complete receiver really happened to me at Michigan, and it started with blocking, no block, no rock. That's what Coach Bill always say. And I want the ball, so I want being a complete receiver to me means just learning how to block. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of receivers forget about that art, but it's really important, very important, because that's how our running backs get to spring big plays and explosives. So Michigan, we run the ball. We pretty even offense. People got our opinion about our offense, but we even. We a balanced offense. So, we got some great backs back there. You feel me? So we want to get them one-on-ones with corners, but if we can get them, just open space and nowhere and nobody in the area, then we good. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's how I feel about my work ethic this offseason, becoming a complete receiver, just tuning in on that blocking.
Right, I thought that was incredibly thoughtful. I'm not saying that I'm surprised that it was thoughtful, but it was more thoughtful than I anticipated when I asked that question of Semaj. So first things first, obviously, the importance of blocking. I think that shows that he is someone who has turned the corner from a mental standpoint and a maturity standpoint, right? He definitely still has that aura of a wide receiver and basically like a number one wide receiver, which isn't exactly what you would think of a 5'10", 174-pound guy. But he has that same type of aura that you expect of a top flight receiver, of basically, I want to get mines. But he still buys into the team mentality. That is absolutely crucial. And that shows you exactly where he and where he's being molded by this coaching staff to fit the culture, right? I don't know that is who he was a year ago. And that goes to show his own maturity, but also how that fits. Now, one of the things that isn't in this clip, he was asked about recruiting and can you expect that Michigan's going to have a bigger pitch for wide receivers? Because you talked a lot about blocking, right? This is how we used to talk about Ohio State before this podcast started, of course. But back in 2016, it was they would get a 5-star wide receiver, every now and again. It was mostly 4 stars at that time. But it was oh, well, why don't you have a great time going over there and blocking, And now the same can kind of be said about Michigan, right? If you're a wide receiver, well, good luck blocking. Semaj also notes yeah, I think the way that receivers look at the Michigan offense is going to be different after this year. So all in all, to me, this again, it points back to the stuff we talked about in segment 1, that it really feels like this offense, it still has the mentality it has. Smash up front, run the ball, but maybe a little bit more of panache when it comes to the passing game. Now, it's certainly something they could have done with J.J. McCarthy, but you gotta walk before you can run. And I really wanted to say you got to walk before you can crawl because that's one of my favorite lines in Ocean's 11, my all-time favorite movie. But I digress. I think that it's one of those things where they do have an opportunity to push things to the next level. Even though the names that are on the roster right now from an offensive perspective are not the ones that you would think let's push it to the next level, right? You would think okay, you got J.J. McCarthy and Roman Wilson. You've got a steady, reliable type in Cornelius Johnson. You'd sit there and say, well, with them and including the running backs we have and ability to run the football, we're just going to go ahead and do this now. We're just going to beat John Navarre's 3,331 yards passing right now, and we're going to show that we can throw the football with more regularity. Now, they did. First 2 games, they threw for 280 yards. I think it was 280 in week 1, 278 in week 2. And that was partially by necessity because the running game got stalled out. But then everything kind of stalled out a little bit in the Bowling Green game. And then they kind of got back to basics and they would pass when they needed to and run when they could. Try to still be that run first. I think, though, even with this changing of the guard, I think that you're going to see a little bit more of a dynamic offense. Dynamic doesn't mean it's going to be like a 70% pass, 30% run. And I think Semaj, he talked about balance in that clip. There was somewhat yardage wise, but when it came to play calling selection, they definitely ran the ball a lot more. It was 560 runs to 350 passes or something like that. Can't remember the numbers offhand, but it was more balanced in the production, less balanced in the attempts. I just think that maybe we'll see that number kind of be more 60-40 rather than 70-30. I think that we'll start to see the passing concepts become a little bit more prevalent because even though we look at it and we say, all right, there's a lot of new faces and things, you still have some things to work with. You have a Colston Loveland and a Donovan Edwards who can be deployed both in the run and the pass game. There are things that Michigan can do to make themselves essentially indefensible if everything goes their way. I think a lot of that is unlocked if Alex Orji becomes the quarterback. Now, that might mean that you're still running 70% running and 30% passing. But that unlocks a lot. And it also unlocks a lot for the passing game. So, I don't know. We'll see. So what does it all mean? What do I think all of this is kind of leading to offensively? What can this offense actually be? Let's talk about that here on the other side here in just a moment. But before we do, I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. And I get a particular, you think it's bright and sunny, it's beautiful. I would, wouldn't be as sad as I am when it's just baseball. But that's because I don't get outside to go to the baseball games. Now, FanDuel wants me to keep the sports going, keep all of the fun and excitement of football or even baseball, any of the other sports, because you can go onto their app and you can dream up whatever bets that you want. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every single day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, so what does all of this mean? Does this mean that the Michigan offense is going to suddenly be in the upper echelon of offenses in college? I don't know about that, obviously. Let's pull up the handy charts over at CFB Stats. So when it came to total offense, it's funny because I was saying forever, like, you know, in order to have that national championship, you've got to have both an offense and a defense in the top 20. Well, Georgia kind of proved that wrong. I'm going to go to them first. To some degree, 2021, Georgia was 25. Michigan actually had, technically, even after playing Georgia, a better offense by yards per game at 24. When it comes to yards per play, Michigan was significantly worse than Georgia, was 6.98 yards per play, whereas which was fourth in the country. Michigan was 22nd. And then Georgia took a big leap forward in basically everything. Still, yards per play was fourth in the country. Michigan was 17th, 6.62. That's where it really is at. But I still like the old school yards per game. Michigan was 24th in 2022. And then in 2023, Michigan actually wins the championship with the 69th ranked offense at 381.2. Yards per play, Michigan was not in the upper echelon. It was 35th. So, I mean, it was in the upper fourth or so, upper fifth, but 6.21 yards per play, tied with Alabama at 35th overall. So no, Michigan doesn't need to be there. It doesn't necessarily need to have the top overall offense or even an offense that's in apparently the upper half of all of college football when it comes to total yards. It certainly needs it in yards per play. But then defensively, of course, Michigan had the number one defense in the country, which I think they will be in the running for doing exactly that again this year. It will be a complimentary football team one way or another, as long as they find a way to convert on third downs, which is the important thing. I do think that they've got playmakers that are somewhat unheralded. I know we all look at recruiting rankings as much as even I sit there and say, you know, don't pay much attention to recruiting rankings. The development at Michigan is phenomenal. To some regard, that almost applies in my mind only to defense, right? But even though they've gotten a lot out of offensive players, and even, you know, Ronnie Bell was a 2-star at the time he committed and a 3-star ultimately, ends up being a really, really solid wide receiver for Michigan, right? As well as a leader. So while we look at the Frederick Moores, the Semaj Morgans, who are 3 stars, as we look at Kendrick Bell, who's a 3-star, I still feel like the development is there, and we saw that a bit with Morgan, at least, thus far. And then the other two looked really good in the spring game when called upon. So as long as the offensive line is there, which it does sound like they're winning some of those battles up front, one of the things that didn't talk about earlier that Kenneth Grant had mentioned is like we're still battling with that offensive line. It doesn't really seem like that's any different. As long as the offensive line is still able to do what it is capable of, which to me, it's like until being proven otherwise, it will, because the second line last year, I still believe would have been the best in the Big Ten. And I think you're going to see a lot of those guys, right? You're going to see, probably, maybe not, depending on how things go, because there is a battle at right tackle, but you're going to see an Andrew Gentry. You're going to see a Giovanni Alhadi. You're going to see whoever ends up being the center, whether it's Crippen, Raheem Anderson. Apparently Dom Judice is just doing phenomenal at both center and guard. So there are options for the Wolverines along that line. Obviously, Miles Hinton, if he plays up to his potential as a former 5-star. Josh Preeb is being talked about as the best guy. And then if they built that depth, because they're going to certainly have formations where they've got 7 offensive linemen. If it is an Evan Link, a Jeff Percy, if it's some of those types of guys, a Nathan Ifobi, who I'm really excited about. If those guys actually do kind of come to play, then this is going to be a really quality situation for the Michigan offense. The receiving game, Michigan hasn't necessarily relied on top flight receivers. And honestly, they've had better luck with 3 stars than they have 5 stars. I mean, granted, there's only one 5-star I can point at, but I mean, you think of the Ballyhooed 2017 class, headlined by Donovan Peoples-Jones as the 5-star. Like, it went in basically this order of excitement. Donovan Peoples-Jones, Tariq Black, Nico Collins, Oliver Martin. Martin ends up transferring. Sayonara, good friend. But it was Nico Collins who ended up having the best career at Michigan. And even he was outshined by Ronnie Bell in most accounts, right? All of them were. Michigan's had better luck with those 3-star types, which, congratulations, that's essentially what you have. Tyler Morris is a 4-star. Your other starters are 3 stars. And then you've got CJ Charleston, Amorian Walker, guys who essentially, again, not at the top of the recruiting rankings. So I think there you're really looking for development. And obviously you need the run game to be able to be dominant, which depends a bit on the offensive line as well as the running backs themselves. But I think you have a lot of options. You've got Colston Loveland and Marlon Klein. You've got a lot of playmaking ability on the offensive side of the ball. If the quarterbacks really are battling out in a good way, because you have to keep in mind, a high tide raises all ships. If it's a scenario where all of the quarterbacks are making each other better by virtue of a true competition, then that just bodes well. Now, the inverse could also be true, that it could just be all mediocre all around, and we'll see that. But I'm encouraged by everything we're hearing about the offense, and I really would not be surprised if it just ends up being a much better unit. Because sometimes, the times when you think, like, the defense going from 2016 to 2017, you're like, well, this defense is going to take a big fall off. And then it doesn't. It does the opposite. It looks great. Would have been one of the all-timers if it wasn't for the offense being so putrid, which made it so they couldn't play complementary football. And that's what it's going to take. The offense is going to have to be able to sustain drives. If it can do that, the defense will be lights out, and that will be better for the offense, and Michigan will be a much better team than what people think. Ranked number 9 in the AP Top 25. That's actually what I had written down as my segment that I was going to do, and then I decided to audible. So it's going to be a tough year, even as a top 10 team, because they've got 3 ranked opponents this season. 3 top 10 opponents, 4 ranked opponents. USC coming in at number 23, Ohio State at 2, Texas at 5, and Oregon at 3. Texas at 4, Oregon at 3. So it's going to be a tougher year from a schedule perspective. But if they can somehow play that Michigan brand of football we've seen in each of the last 3 years, they'll probably be in pretty good shape. All right, we're going to continue talking about some of the stuff coming out of this press conference. We're going to do that earlier on Tuesday before I go down and talk to Sharon Moore. Talk about him to him. And then we'll get to what Sharon Moore said on Wednesday. Maybe we'll do a mailbag on Thursday, and we'll continue in with the fall camp stuff on Friday. So that's our plan for the week. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.